I want to take you on a journey and find nexus where history, mythology, and fantasy crosses paths, and also show you some cool old structures. Here we have buildings from all across Georgian history, from Neolithic menhirs and monoliths to more modern 17th and 19th century style houses and courtyards. Here, spirit of the old world still remains, even though all this was moved here during Soviet times. I wanted to show here that mystical and mundane weren't as separate worlds back then. Spirits, magic, and cosmos itself was a part of your home and everyday life. People in the past lived in a magical reality, where hauntings, hexes, and pixies were as part of everyday life, but out of sight. To some, it is still. You see this especially when reading ethnographical accounts of folklore recorded in 18th to early 20th centuries. I have read a lot of them for my research, and trust me, their tall tales are more magical than most high fantasy stories I read. I've talked about big myths, creation of the world, war between gods and giants, cosmic floods. But most stories are everyday folks' encounter with magical and supernatural. From village teens being beaten up and bullied by local water spirits called Ali, to grown men losing a wrestling match with hairy goblins called Chinga, regular folk had more contact with supernatural than nations next door. One storyteller even claims that he stole a ball from a Georgian rugby playing ogres, called Lelo. Funniest part was even those ogres were borrowing that ball from someone else. Pre-industrial existence was basically a fantasy world, just monsters and magic was happening in a next village or 9 mountains over. Here we see one of the unique details of Caucasian architecture. You'll find this in many old homes across the Caucasus region and even beyond. The Dedabodzi, the mother, a symbolic from pre-Christian world, where it integrated into Christianized society and survived in our consciousness. These mother pillars are cosmic anchors or the wall tree that hold up the heavens, the roof in this case, and creating a link between three realms, the underworld, the middle world, and the upper world, Queskneli, Shuaskneli, and Zeskneli in Georgian. It has ancient symbols carved into it, solar disco, and many others, some of its meaning lost and forgotten. The house was a microcosmos where mother pillar and hearth fire pit represented divine elements, places of worship as our ancestors prayed to greater gods, but especially to house spirits, little gods, or house angels after Christianization. In Georgian, everything important has mother or deda in front of it. Deda Mitza, Mother Earth, Deda Bodzi, Mother Pillar, Adgilis Deda, Place Mother, all connecting back to the ancient matriarchal cult. Fun fact, Georgia is one of the few direct descendants of Neolithic farmers who were thought to have worshipped Mother Nature God, but most of those cultures were conquered by more patriarchal invaders, like Indo-Europeans, in most Europe and Indo-Iran Semitic peoples in the Middle East and North Africa. Some say that's why we had so many prominent female venerate Mother Mary, taking her as our protector. You can check out my video where I visit Uplisiche, where I go into more detail about the subjects. To make it clear, Georgia is far from a feminist utopia, and our society is patriarchal, but it's far, far better than most of the world. Keeping in Christianity, Holy Pillar survives and becomes part of our major Christian canon by this story of Sveti Tchoeli, or the living pillar. According to the story, Georgian Jewish community leader Elios was visiting Jerusalem to meet this local hippie named Jesus. Unfortunately, got there too late, but he manages to buy Jesus' robes and brings it back to Mtskheta, old capital of Iberia, where his sister Sidonia, who was thought to be early Christian convert, hugged it, and died from the news that Jesus was crucified. Nobody could get her to let go of the robes, so she was buried with it. After centuries, from the grave grew a mighty tree, spruce or some other evergreen tree. There are many contradictory versions of this story. This is but one. After 300 years, a young Cappadocian girl, who is said to be the nephew of Saint George, Saint Nino, converts Georgian king to Christianity. She came here for the Christ's robes, and when she finds a tree growing from it, by the aid of angels, turns the tree into a living pillar, or Svetitskhoveli, that holds up the first church. This is a huge story. I'll go deeper into it next time. I just wanted to tell you this story as how old pagan practice became adopted into Christian canon. We find interesting elements of human sacrifice here. It's a bit of a flimsy theory, but we see how a human with a divine relic becomes base for a cosmic tree to grow. Also, we can see interesting elements of human sacrifice of sorts, well, more of a burial practice. It's a flimsy theory, but we see how a human with divine relic becomes base for a cosmic tree to grow. There are human sacrifices to divine trees all the time in mythology. Yggdrasil grows on a corpse of Ymir in Norse mythology. There are many folklore and rituals of deaths being given to the trees as nourishment. But another similar sacrifice or burial ritual is burying family members under the house, or even sacrificing someone to a newly built home so that their spirit can inhabit the home as its protector. And that's where lots of house elf and domovoy legends originate from, going back to the house spirits and hearth gods that protect the home. Another YouTube creator, Crowhag, covered the house spirits in her Romanian mythology video, so if you want a better deep dive on this topic, check out her channel. Very surprised how you can find similarities in ancient roots of other cultures. But we are all related if you go back far enough, especially in the Black Sea neighborhood. But I'll say here that a lot of mythical and later fantasy creatures and races all originate as ancient ancestor spirits that dwelt either in forests, fields, caves, or even your home. Such spirits later evolved in our imagination into gods and monsters. But a lot of them started out as spirits of certain area that usually were put there by our ancestor as their ancestors were laid there to rest. To use a very crude and modern idea, think of ghosts. According to paranormal folklore, spirits of the dead can get bound to a place. It becomes their domain, can manipulate the environment, and can hunt the living if they are upset. That's basically Kikimura, and majority of Eastern European, especially Slavic monsters, the restless undead. Some possess local animals, werewolves, some return to their old bodies as the undead, some live in the waters and drown passers-by like Rusalka. They feed on negative energy and death because they are wayward spirits that aren't cared for. Now imagine befriending your house phantom, taking care of them, giving them gifts, building a relationship so they help you out, do some chores, and protect you from evil spirits. This is why vampires need to be invited in. They don't have some sort of OCD or proper manners. The home their restless asses want to defile is protected by your nana's ghost. Modern fantasy is so focused on copying other fantasy, we miss much integral part of the lore that made those mythical worlds function. Great modern storytellers use those historical elements to enrich their stories, like J.R.R. Tolkien borrowing Borrow-Wights, restless spirits of old Organ burial mounds that attack hobbits until Big Man Bombadil saves them, or how George R.R. Martin used lots of similar ideas for his Others and White Walkers, who need to be burned like a lot of Slavic king, who is just less fun. Graveyards being scary is such a Western thing. We in Eastern Europe spend a lot of time visiting graves of our family members and having many days dedicated to the dead. Just look at these burial stones. One is a horse, this one is a sheep, that one has a guy on it. They are very cool. Many of those stones have carvings of old soldiers holding bows and arrows, inscriptions telling of their great deeds. Some carve stone menhirs to look like them, some try to carry their earthly possessions to the afterlife, so they build bigger and grander burials, creating organs to hold their wealth. Those organs became bigger, grander, turning into pyramids of Egypt and many other great burial sites. In Irish Celtic mythology, the Tuatha De Danann, old gods of the land, said to live in the hills. They were even called hill folk. Some said that these mounds were cursed. Others claimed they were magic weapons and ancient treasures hidden by the Fae, such as leprechauns hiding pots of gold under the rainbow. Those were monolithic burials. They held treasures of old kings and lords, meant for their eternal resting places, becoming spirits and deities through their ancestor worship. We have found many fine treasures now, but unfortunately, many of those grave sites have already been looted centuries and centuries ago by past adventurers and grave robbers. Those ancient burials gaining legendary status over the centuries, gaining life of their own, fact and fiction mixing together, and after 1,000 years, those are no longer burials of old chieftains, shamans, and warlords, but homes and portals of the realm of the ancestor gods and spirits, creating bases of old myths and modern fantasy. Similar dolmens exist in all over Eurasia, each having some legend or fairy tale attached to it. Little monument here has its own legend that apparently during the age before man, giants and little folk, little Juja, as they just call them, dwarves in Georgian are called Juja, and giants are Devi, of course. Devis and Jujas lived together as friends before they started a war and hatred came between them. So giants, the Devi is more Indo-European, Indo-Iranian word, but probably have an even more ancient name that is lost to time. But the giants and the dwarves, Devi and Juja, lived together, and Devis built for Jujas this little giant monolith monument where the spirits, basically the old burial sites, are said to be haunted or the homes of ancient spirits. This is also considered to be a home of an ancient spirit. Now resides far, far away from where it was built. It was considered to be dwelling place of the Juja, the small folk that were built by the giants, but later Christianization, the true meaning of this place was forgotten, and now it resides in a museum. As you can see, the structure is pretty massive compared to me, but entranceway is pretty small. I can't actually fit through it. Greeks call these giant stone monoliths Cyclopean monuments. As well, we call them Devi domains, or Devebis Nasachlari. They thought that only ancient race of giants could have built them, as it takes immense strength to move those stones. There are almost every type of Cyclopean structure here in Georgia and around Caucasus. I've already talked about few of them, like Old Dragon Stones and Nuplisiche Stone Citadel. Soon I will visit more, as there are many, many more here. Many believe that these type of structures originate here and spread all over Eurasia. I believe that Neolithic farmers from Anatolia brought not only farming to Europe, but also brought ancient Caucasians who built those stone monuments. Only those with the mountain genes can build such massive stone structures. Also, earthbound burials are called korgans, not kurgans. All this talk about cyclopean structures, ancestor spirits, and old gods, I still need to mention one of the most interesting aspects of Georgian mythology: godsons and their places of worship and veneration. These stone structures are called khadi. a place of worship or an icon of sons of god Morige, bringer of order, and the primal god of Eastern Georgian Highland mythology. According to Highland legends, God sent heavenly heroes, Htishwilebi, to protect humanity from brutal giants, the Devi, who oppressed mankind. Again, those cyclopean structures I've shown you were built by those giants. Giants built with big stones, and Godson shrines are built with smaller stone slabs. The famous Caucasian towers are built the same exact way. The places where God sent heroes, later referred to as angels, landed, mountain folk built shrines of worship and keep in contact with them. And more were built where God's sons had famous battles and competitions with Devi, dragons, and other monsters who hurt humanity. Some gods were celestial, but some were born as mortals who later ascended into heavenly court. Much similar to how Christianity has angels and saints. Matter of fact, after almost 200 years of Christian influence, many aspects were mixed with local folklore and Christianization. Those old demigods now are worshipped as saints and angels. Many were turned into Saint George. That's why he is so popular in Georgia. He is the archetypal dragon slayer that Christian missionaries mixed with local ancestor heroes. This is a huge and deep topic. I'll of course get into, as say it with me, later. I just wanted to show a living example how ancestral heroes get deified through aid of ancient stone structures. There was an old stance on mythology by early Christian scholars and scribes writing that these gods were but humans from prehistory whose existence was shrouded in mystery. Many Norse and Celtic myths were written down in similar mentality, that all these mighty gods were but ancient advanced humans from Bronze Age and beyond, which is partially true. Most monolithic structures, for example, in British Isles, were built by Neolithic farmers who are replaced by many groups. We think that Celtic druids built those Stonehenges and others, and that they are the original natives. But there were settlers to these lands like Anglo-Saxons after them, or Neolithic farmers before, who also themselves replaced native hunter-gatherers. We do see this reflected in Celtic myths, as there are many different generations of settlers to the island. Tuatha coming and pushing out older Firbolg, who were then pushed by Fomorians, starting their endless feud, and later by Celts, who pushed them into the hills and the other world. There are much better Celtic and Irish YouTubers who you can check out who talk about their myths. Shout out to Storycrow, check them out. I like taking the idea from both sides. All mythical beings and stories were once real, and they are our ancestors. So this is an impromptu ending. This was supposed to be a 5-minute prelude to another much longer video, but I kept adding and adding, and it turned into a 20-minute long video on a very complicated. And this a very long video on its own, and it took me more than a month to finish, so I sometimes had to stop myself and say someone else already covered this, you don't need to go so deep into the subject. And shout out to other YouTubers I've mentioned. At some points I decided to just shout out other YouTubers who already covered this subject. Hopefully I can fix my upload schedule and get back to making at least 2 or 3 videos a month, not this messy upload schedule. Thank you to my Patreon support on the saddle, and continue the YouTube waves, make better, many great ideas for the future, but it takes more effort and build up to achieve bigger and greater things. And thank you to my Patreons, please join. So here's for the future, and thank you all for watching my silly little videos. Bye bye.